No, Alejandro, this is not how we're starting this video. We're supposed to engage the viewers with the topic. The video must be exciting. We must make them thrilled about the idea of submerging yourself underground, not bore them to death. Oh really? You dig that? Nah, I'm just getting started, but really get a better track going. Something spicy, something that hasn't been used in our library before. Too weeby. Too blocky. Too classy. Ooh, that's more like it. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tales about a Family of Mischievous Moles. First of all, why? Why this kind of video? In a world full of original indie games, spicy dramas sprouting left and right, and stories worth a deeper analysis, why make a video on such a random topic? To me, video games are all about creativity. They are the best medium to express artistic vision in all kinds of ways you'd never expect. Movies, paintings, or animations are very one-dimensional. They are great on their own, don't get me wrong, but if you go to a cinema to watch a movie, that's it. Whereas in video games, not only do you get to see some astonishing stories, but also experience them via the gameplay itself. It's much easier to submerge yourself into the universe given to you by making you actively partake in that story. That's why the gameplay itself must be crafted carefully to fit the given narrative, and that task is usually harder than expected. This isn't an issue with the majority of single-player games. They are made to suit one person's experience. Think God of War, Zelda, Mario, and other titles that might be your personal favorites, but multiplayer games usually shift their stories outside the playable area. Most oftentimes to their YouTube channels, official websites, or other social media platforms where separate animations or even cinematics are posted. This completely changes the way you experience a given game by focusing 100% on the gameplay factor inside the game itself and adding something spicy outside for the die-hard fans. So if the game itself is only relying on its gameplay factor, it must be good, right? Companies like Blizzard Entertainment fail to realize this simple factor, actively trying their best to make the player base hate them, but this time the video isn't about crapping on Blizzard. Shockingly, I know. Welcome surprise, guys. Today's video will focus on that creativity factor in the gameplay design and why the ability that is burrowing is the perfect candidate for this exact topic. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Before we descend into this topic further, let's establish what burrowing even is, what can be considered as a burrowing ability, and get rid of some sneaky imposters on our way. Burrowing in the Cambridge Dictionary is described as an act of digging a hole in the ground, with an emphasis on housing in the dug hole. In the case of this video, this definition does not help at all, so let me think of something more suitable for this video. Burrowing is an ability that causes your playable character or any given entity to change its state from surfaced to submerged. The entity may or may not gain additional perks or debuffs while being in one of those states. Additionally, the burrowing and especially unburrowing as an action can have a different effect attached to that too. I really tried to make this definition simple, but the more you think about it, the more unique things you start to notice about this concept. The first special thing that I noticed about the concept of burrowing is that unlike most abilities or weapons in video games, burrowing is one of those buy one get one free packages where under one button bind you unknowingly have access to two separate actions, in this case submerging and emerging from the ground. In games like Dota 2 or Overwatch where characters have a limited amount of abilities, things like that add much needed depth to otherwise bland and simple characters. And what's even better is that burrowing is one of those mechanics that sounds complicated on paper, but it is very intuitive and understandable to all players. It's perfectly logical that the button to dig up is under the same button to dig down, and to be fair, it's hard to find a similar execution of this idea that doesn't require a whole lecture to explain. Secondly, the entire Burrowing theme is very open to creative freedom. As you may have seen in the intro, later on in the video I will be analyzing deeper 4 game video characters, and what's great about them is that although they all have a burrowing ability, none of them come even close to each other. Nowadays, gamers love comparing game A to game B, and point fingers to parts of those games that either have been copied one-to-one or took inspiration a little too literally. But I swear, I have never seen anyone complaining about a character being able to burrow, and people mentioning it's lazy because some game has done it before. When I say dodge rolling, what is the first title that comes to your mind? Dark Souls? Maybe Enter the Gungeon? Although they are 2 different games, the mechanic isn't different at all. You use it for the exact same reason, it works in the exact same way, and you know what to expect when another game does it. But when I say burrowing, I don't think anyone is thinking transforming into a tactical UAV. More on that later. On top of that, the burrowing ability isn't exclusive to characters playable by players. It's a very common trope amongst the AI enemies in all kinds of games, such as Binding of Isaac. Enemies can hide underground to make them more difficult to fight, and testing out the skills of the players. Can they react quick enough to dodge the threat? Can they use the opportunity when the boss is unborrowed and is exposing itself to the damage? One last elephant in the room before we move on: destructible environment, or more specifically Deep Rock Galactic and Minecraft. Both of those games are known for their sandbox-like surroundings, but I do not count digging straight down or getting into a cubbyhole as a burrowing ability. Sure, in Minecraft PvP it is very effective to burrow yourself to escape from the enemies, but that is a totally different thing, and it falls under the mentioned a second ago destructible environment umbrella. Same with DRG, the art of making a bunker to gain an advantage over some AI creatures is part of how the developers want you to explore the universe of dwarves in caves. So, these are the fundamentals of burrowing and why I think this trope brings so much to the gaming sphere. But let's see what others have to say. We live in a timeline where all I say is right, and you shouldn't question it, but it is important to take into consideration what others might think about this topic. That's why I have reached out to a couple of other content creators who have a different gaming experience than me. This way, the perspective of what we consider unique and original can be wider than solely my own words, although they are correct. I asked all of them the exact same question. What do you think is the most unique ability in gaming's history? And feel free to also give me your answers in the comments. I'm more than happy to discuss and talk about this with anyone. But now, let's hear what the gentleman had to say. What do you think is the most unique ability in video game history?
I've always had a thing for like the Pikmin games when I was younger.
Pikmin games?
You know those? Yeah, the Pikmin games. The whole like whistling mechanics and stuff in those. Like the general whistling mechanics, I think, would be my answer.
And how does the whistling mechanic work?
Like you can move like NPCs in like a certain direction or to like attack things.
So it's basically any mechanic that when you press something, some units come to that location.
Yeah, I'd say that pretty much.
Okay, that is a very boring answer, but I'll
Wait,
take
what do you
it.
mean?
Okay.
Yeah, man, Pikmin's awesome.
I have to say, the gravity gun from Half-Life 2.
Do you think any other game has done something similar to that?
So here's the thing. I have not played like an insane amount of video games. But I think, well, yes. The first one that I can think of is Dead Space. Dead Space has something similar, but I mean, I can't think of a game that does it better than Half-Life 2.
One second, I gotta figure out the name. Let me text my brother. There's a name for this VR game that has this really cool feature. It's a game called Swarm. So it's like a grappling hook, and you swing on these like levitated platforms, and your goal is to stay like in the air while shooting these like robots that are trying to shoot you down. If you touch the water, you get eaten by a shark. You can also slow down time with like holding a button on one of your controllers. I don't know if it's unique, but I really like it. It feels like a sci-fi movie. You know, you're the main character.
What do you think is the most unique ability in gaming's history?
Right, you could have texted me the question, and then I could have thought about it.
No. You need to answer on the spot right now.
Dude, I don't flip in there. So in this new game that I'm playing, called The First Descendant, there's a character called Lepic, and his whole kit is just grenades. And then there's one where he just rolls a grenade on the floor, and then it just creates like a singularity. Yeah, it sucks everyone in the radius in. So many games that even that they might be like quite unique in the game, but when you compare them to other games, there's like a different variation of the same ability. It's just got a different animation.
Isn't that great? How you can execute the same idea but differently.
Yeah, it's good.
This is hard because a lot of different games come to mind that have very unique abilities in them, and not necessarily something as generic as, say, a certain type of gun or movement. I think the one that, and this might be a weird example, I think the one that comes into my mind that gives the player the most unique ways to experience the same game over and over again in many ways they see fit is being able to copy the abilities of your enemy, like you see in Kirby. I think that is probably one of the most creative things you can do in a video game that just opens up the doors for doing so many different things with the exact same environment or the exact same level. But if it's something like a PvP game, then you have infinitely less ability or like infinitely less potential to get creative with it, because you're limited to just copying a move set, right? You can't get because you're only experiencing the same thing over and over again with PvP.
Are you ready to answer one simple question? It's just one question.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most unique video game ability that has been ever created? It can be destructible surroundings, it can be a grappling hook, it can be bazookas, it can be grenades.
Huh. It's you just listed like everything from the finals.
Oh, whoops.
So there's this mod for Minecraft which adds 4D. So anytime you walk, you get teleported into a different random dimension. So like the fourth dimension.
Fourth dimension?
Yeah, and if not, then it's super hot. How when you move, time moves.
I only want to ask you one simple question.
Oh no.
What do you think is the most unique ability in gaming's history?
In gaming's history? I think my favorite thing, personally, is like the engineer's turret from Team Fortress 2. I think that's my personal favorite.
So your answer, I read it as turrets overall. Like
No.
it's engineer's turret,
No.
it's Torbjorn's turret. Okay, so
the upgrading, like you having to maintain it. It only works in that game, and that's why I like it so much. It's just no one else has replicated the same type of balance that the engineer's Team Fortress or the Team Fortress 2 engineer has gotten.
As you might have heard, the boys really tried to make it harder for me by giving me a different answer each, but I'll try to handle it all like a good prison guard in the lovely country that is UK. Jokes aside, I am more than happy with this outcome. It clearly shows that different people prefer different things, and when it comes to a subject that is creativity, which is very heavily based on opinions, I was destined to be facing basically anything. Creativity is defined as the power of creating something original using your imagination. So according to this definition, the least creative answer that I have been given is the fourth dimension mentioned by Lewis. It's a concept already established by the mathematicians and other people who are way smarter than me. But if I had to explain it in my own words, it's like 3D but more complicated. It's like taking other more advanced scientific concepts like quantum physics or the entire periodic table and turning it into a video game mechanic. And sure, it might end up creating something fun, but the extreme niche will not be understandable, let alone fun for the majority of the players. As a great example, I'm sure many of you heard about the concept of 4D or even 5D chess, had a little chuckle and never actually played it. It's a funny concept, but it doesn't give room for flexibility nor accessibility. Secondly, the concept of grenades mentioned by Mango Messiah. This trope can be executed in so many ways, it's absolutely understandable why it found its way onto this video. The Call of Duty franchise itself demonstrates how a simple throwable object can vary in what it does and how it's used. It's also very easy to understand the concept of a grenade, and building off of that base feels very intuitive. Grenades are also seen in a lot of other games, and I think it's a great testament to how flexible they really are. The amount of variance per game is only limited by the imagination of the developers and patience from the balancing team. To shine some spotlight on this part, let me give you 3 examples of grenades that all can be classified as named grenades all have the layering function but look completely different. Pipe bombs from Left 4 Dead, Gersh devices from COD Zombies, and theropods from Half-Life 2. Pipe bombs lure the zombies to the bomb itself and explode after a few seconds. Gersh devices also lure zombies but a little more aggressively, and now that I look at it, maybe the monkey bombs were a better fit, but oh well. And lastly, the theropods lure in wild animals from Australia that mow down anything they will find on their way. Executing the same concept but differently is the essence of creativity in my opinion, which the nades represent perfectly. Slowing down time is similar to grenades in a way that the execution of this mechanic is always the same. The game is suddenly moving slower, but the way you achieve this is up to the creative vision of the designers. Superhot presents slowing down time as its main mechanic you activate by stopping your movement. Fighting games slow down time to put emphasis on stronger attacks, and clustered trucks gives you this ability under a press of a button to make it easier to find a safe spot you can jump to. Personally, I wouldn't say this mechanic is the peak of gaming's history, although I will not deny that Superhot is one of those titles that simply cannot be underestimated as it provides a completely unique experience, but so does Minecraft, so does Baldur's Gate 3, and so did Pac-Man back in the day. Those were the entire games that took the spotlight for an original product, but what I am looking for in this video and in the question that has been asked in the interview was the singular mechanic that my respondents thought was the most original. Speaking of monumental titles, Team Fortress and Half-Life are next. Kendall really likes the Sentry built by Engineer, while Tony likes Gravity Gun. Both of those relics came from a parent company, Valve, and I will not say anything positive about them, otherwise I can easily say goodbye to my 5 subscribers. But credit where credit is due, both of these utensils are an unusual sight to behold. Firstly, the Sentry from a class-based shooter Team Fortress 2 is a placeable and upgradable building that is attacking the enemy players when they come in range and sight of the turret. The creativity factor comes in the freedom of placement of this weapon, making the player responsible. How will this object interact with the environment? Will it defend the objective? Will it be anchored among the rest of Engineer's buildings for an impenetrable fortress? Or will it be sitting right outside of the enemy spawn doors? Additionally, the concept of leveling up is no strange topic to gaming, but nurturing your building and being rewarded for putting in the exclusive to Engineer resource metal will grant more firepower and health to the structure. It really does create a unique gameplay experience with not only the resource management but also potential positional manipulation. Try repeating that fast 10 times. Good luck. Potential positional manipulation. Potential positional manipulation. Speaking of manipulating, the Gravity Gun from Half-Life is great at that. But opposite to Boogie 2988, it doesn't manipulate people, but rather physical objects. Well, yes, including people. It's one of the most developed tools in gaming's history, allowing the players to interact with the environment like never before, grabbing physical objects and launching them at your enemies, or in Gary's mod's case, modeling and animating even. The creativity factor is blasting through the roof on this one, and it's a gimmick that no game has been able to replicate the same way. The sister game Portal also uses the mechanic of picking up physical objects using the portal gun, but it's more so focused on placing a cube on a specific spot and rotating it a little, whereas the Gravity Gun from the Half-Life is one of your main offensive and defensive utilities. But at the end, how do you execute a Gravity Gun any other way? It will always only manipulate objects. Sure, the possibilities are practically endless with what objects can you interact with, but the creativity factor comes from the person operating the gun itself. The Gravity Gun is like a paintbrush. As a tool itself, it isn't very impressive, but what is impressive is what people can do with it. What doesn't succeed in that front is this whistle from Pikmin, suggested by Rockskull. The execution of a grouping up mechanic in a form of a funny sound device is not only cute, but also entertaining to use. But unlike the Gravity Gun, it only has this one use. The design isn't bad, it's why other games also implement similar mechanics like the whistle from World of Goo. But when you compare this whistle to other things suggested in the interview, you begin to see what I'm seeing. In Pikmin, it's a handy tool that simply assists you along your way. The game could easily replace the whistle with any other soft instrument like a flute, or throw away the instrument part entirely and simplify it to a simple pinging system, so at the end it's just a game mechanic with a neat sound effect attached to it. I don't feel the same creative juice as with the previously mentioned Gravity Gun or even Engineer's Sentry. And the last answer that I'd like to interpret is the ability copying suggested by Zesty Jesus. He specifically calls out the Kirby franchise, and as As soon as I heard ability copying and Kirby, the first thing that came to my mind was that meme, what superpower would Kirby get if he absorbed you? And the answer was depression. Still makes me chuckle till this day. But in all seriousness, if you think about it, is copying what's already existing in the game and using it yourself the peak of originality? Getting to play as something that was already established in the said universe? Getting access to a moveset previously unavailable to you, yet familiar because you had the chance to see it? Zesty specifically emphasizes that he doesn't mean the PvP ability copying, and I agree, Echo goddamn sucks, but how different is it really from single-player games, where the designers made the game to be creative on purpose and gave you this entire world of Kirby to explore and have fun with? Is it really fair to compare a singular ability to an entire game designed around a creative gimmick? I'm asking way too many rhetorical questions, aren't I? It's safe to assume that there was no wrong answer to my question in the interviews I have conducted, but what I wanted to talk about in this video is not what game is the most creative, because in that case, Minecraft would absolutely win. Look, there's even a creative game mode over there. But a singular ability that proves creativity in gaming is a wonderful phenomenon, an ability that no matter the game will be done differently and in its own unique way. Something that on the surface sounds familiar, but once you get deeper into it, you will find out it's much more developed and convoluted than you might have thought initially. And that's exactly why not slowing down time, not any whistle or even gravity gun, but burrowing is the perfect candidate for this topic. And I am going to prove it. I don't want to bore you with details, so this and the next chapters will be very brief, I promise. Their main goals are to showcase the different executions of burrowing abilities and describe what makes them special. Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare 2 brings us the longest game title I have in this script, but also the very first example of burrowing. For each of the chapters, I will gather the 3 main attributes of what burrowing/unburrowing gives to the character I will be focusing on. Garden Warfare 2 is a class-based third-person shooter that's more on the goofy side rather than your typical Call of Duty, but to be fair, the most recent COD titles might be goofier than this children's game. One of the playable characters is the always smiling purple lad Chomper, and among his abilities we find the glorious burrowing. Its 3 main attributes are safety, stealth, and surprise, but if we want to break the triple S standard, it's damage. I will be honest here, Chomper's burrowing is my least favorite on this list, due to him having to shake his ass in the air like nobody cared before actually submerging underground, giving the enemies a huge window of time to shoot him down. That's why I believe Chomper is much more effective if you play him as a stealthy assassin. As soon as you burrow, you are immune to all kinds of damage, and you're also on a timer to ensure you won't be an ostrich the entire match. The fact you are underground also means you are much harder to spot, meaning the flanking behind the enemy lines is much more efficient than just running at them. You see, Chomper is a close range character, and I don't mean close range like shotguns close, I mean smell my breath kind of close. You really need to be up the enemy's face to deal any kind of damage, but the burrowing ability has one more ace up its sleeve. The unburrowing part of Chomper's burrow allows for a potential insta-kill if you unburrow right under your enemy. This won't kill your target instantly, but you will slowly devour them, meaning that if they won't get any help from the teammates around, they are doomed to be digested. This gameplay loop is very fun, and it might not be as effective as the sweaty corn players, but it's definitely entertaining when you pull off this wacky play. Once you consume the enemy foe, your tummy gets a little tired and you are heavily handicapped and vulnerable. In other words, Chomper is a character that using stealth suicides for a singular insta-kill. Huh. Sounds familiar. Design-wise, Chomper being a plant of some sorts makes perfect sense that he will be able to utilize the soil right under him to his advantage and pose a constant threat while submerged. Also, the animation of him actually eating the enemies is golden, and I swear I only play this game to make my enemies rage at this very balanced mechanic. But since burrowing in Garden Warfare 2 is used as an offensive tool to assassinate the enemy gamers, does that mean every other instance of burrowing will be the same? Secondly on our list Next we have the friendly neighborhood monster that nobody cares about, the Haka, originally from StarCraft, but for this video we are taking a look at the Haka from Heroes of the Storm. This creature, as I have no idea what else to call it, is a monster that feeds on essence gathered from his prey, and to aid him with his hunts, of course he has the ability to burrow. Why else would he be in this video? Heroes of the Storm is a MOBA, so each character also has its set of unique abilities, but what's extra special about this game is that opposite to other more commonly known MOBAs like League of Legends or Dota 2, each hero in Heroes of the Storm has a skill tree. This means that upon leveling up your character you will be able to choose a talent. Talents are enhancements to your abilities. Some are simple like extra range or shorter cooldown, but some are much more complicated like gambits or some spicy passive effects. But for the sake of simplicity in this video, let's take a step back and start from the ground and slowly work our way deeper. The Burrowing on its own is a simple invulnerability at its core that lasts 2 seconds and can be deactivated by unburrowing after 0.5 seconds, and that's it. Go under to feel safe, go back up when it's safe too. To balance things out, while burrowed you move 50% slower, which makes total sense, but if you decide to dedicate some talents during the game into this burrow ability, it becomes much more than that. A fully taken care of burrow is granting you crowd control, stealth, and on top of that, mobility. The first available talent grants the Haka stealth for 3 seconds after unburrowing, and also knocks nearby enemies back, dealing some damage and slowing them by 30% for 3 seconds. This drastically changes how you play the hero, as now the burrow is not only your escape crutch tool, but also an engage and disruption. Additionally, it doesn't transform this ability entirely into an offensive one, as the stealth on unburrow helps a ton both in disengaging and engaging into combat. What's also worth noting is that compared to previously described Chomper, the Haka's burrow is practically instant, meaning its use can be much more versatile and fast-paced. Speaking of fast, the second and last talent simply increases the movement speed while burrowing to 125%. This change sounds much smaller than the previous talent, but it also completely changes your gameplay. Your engagement can be much more aggressive, and combined with the stealth on unburrow, you can make use of the bonus movement speed when burrowed to get safely inside the enemy team. Then unburrow in the middle of them to affect them with your debuffs, and then you and your team can easily profit off of your play without you dying, as you can reposition safely with the 3-second stealth. Escaping from sticky situations is also much easier, as now if you burrow, the enemies will have even more issues catching up to you, so your escape can be even smoother and less stressful. Although we are still talking about going under and above ground, the already mentioned 2 games prove that the same concept can be done drastically different. One is a stealth tool with assassination as its priority, and the other is one of the most useful utility a character can get in the game. So let's go deeper and see if the continuation of the burrowing topic will begin to feel stale, or will it still be able to surprise you. Also, yes, I forgot the replacement for the horse for the Haka for this video, just ignore that fact. Overwatch 2, a first hero-based shooter that is now officially evolving backwards. Among the playable heroes we find an adventurous gender-bender Venture, who are challenging my pronouns writing skills, and boy, as a non-English speaker, this ain't easy. Their primary weapon is a powerful drill, so naturally digging through the ground will be one of their core abilities. And just like that, Venture is bringing, or are bringing, please stay with me gamers, yet another variant of the burrowing ability. This time the 3 main attributes are safety, mobility, and damage. Once again, the burrowing is on a timer, and the process of submerging under is taking a short second, but it's still nothing compared to Chomper. What is worth noticing is that we're beginning to fall into the repetitive cycle of assigning the invulnerability status to the submerged state, which is also why all of the iterations of this mechanic have been on a limited timer. But what makes the Venture burrow stand out is its combination with a charge-up mechanic. When you decide it's time to peek your head back up, you are presented with 3 bars that charge up the longer you hold your fire button, which translates to, you guessed it, more damage. It's a quite smart decision choice, as you are choosing how much time you are giving to your enemies for them to get away from the danger zone in exchange for more potential damage. Additionally, while burrowed, you're not only slightly faster than the default running speed, but you can also use your second ability, Drill Dash, to swiftly swiftly reposition in the direction you were aiming, making the burrowed experience much more fun and dynamic. With this in mind, you can clearly see that it's once again up to the player to decide whether they need to use this ability offensively or defensively, as this ability can be great at both of these scenarios. The big radius of your emerge explosion can be devastating when combined with a flank or the rest of your team's utility, but at the same time you can safely reposition or disengage if the fight you are participating in with your primary weapon wasn't going so smoothly. There's one more factor that I'd like to mention strictly for the sake of distinguishing each of the burrowing abilities we've covered so far. Venture is the only character who upon burrowing is launching themselves significantly higher than the rest of the crew I prepared for this video. This emerge combined with the drill dash allows Venture to not only dominate underground, but also thrive in the vertical domain, getting access to beneficial positions higher up or potentially striking your enemies from above gives this mole very dynamic gameplay. As a reminder, remember my dear viewers that we're talking about popping in and out of the ground the entire time. A simple press of a button to go down and another one to go up. This isn't rocket science, yet we managed to get a small grasp of the clouds already. But if you still aren't convinced that burrowing is the most creative ability in game's history, you better hold on to your seats, as the last character I've got for this video will blow your mind. One of my beloved childhood games was Worms. You guys remember Worms? Yeah, you don't. Only people above the age of 20 remember this game. Hey, yeah, you, Worms fans, repeat after me. The retirement home is not that bad. But you know what's even cooler than playing as a worm with a bazooka? Well, nothing. I just wanted to remind you that Worms was a great game that existed. Have fun going to sleep today knowing you won't be playing any Worms, buckaroo. But now on a more serious note, League of Legends... League of Legends... The most popular free-to-play MOBA has given birth to one heck of a worm called Rexi. She, like the rest of the champions in the game, has a bunch of abilities, including a passive one that we'll get to in a second, but the main one I want to talk about in this chapter is, you guessed it, burrowing! There are two main factors that differentiate this burrowing from the previous three, those being vision and accessibility. All the previous iterations of burrowing had you simply switch state, or in Venture's case even go to third person, but Rexi has gotten a more realistic treatment, where upon going under, your vision gets almost completely shut down. I say almost, as once you are burrowed, you get access to a passive ability called Tremor Sense, which in simpler words means you have now become a tactical UAV for your team. Although you can't directly see what's happening around you, the enemy players or even monsters will have their positions revealed periodically in a form of a pinging circle even through solid terrain, as long as they are in range of you, indicated by the purple ring shown around you when burrowed. To make this part of the burrowing experience even more immersive, whilst balanced at the same time, their locations are revealed only when they are moving, meaning that you can fully counter Rek'sai's scanner by treating her like a T-Rex. Stand completely still and pray to God you're not standing on a ward. The accessibility I mentioned a second ago is also very crucial to understand how this burrowing mechanic is making a name for itself. As opposite to the previous three, there is no timer limiting your stay at the Dirt and Dust Hotel. The burrowing and unburrowing of Rexi is more of a stance swap, which is highlighted even more by the fact once you do switch your stance, you get access to different abilities that correspond to each form. For example, only when burrowed can this creature create tunnels that help her traverse the Summoner's Rift, and only while unburrowed can Rek'sai bite your ankles. Staying underground also has its benefits, because when you are burrowed, you not only gain a small movement speed, but also by burrowing you trigger your passive ability, which consumes fury generated from doing damage, and converts it into health regeneration. So, in summary, the main three attributes of Rek'sai's burrowing are mobility, information, and crowd control. Yes, you heard me right. On top of all those things, the recast of the burrow ability, or in other words, re-emerging from the ground, has its benefits too. If you just so happen to unburrow under an enemy, or even better, under multiple enemies, all of them will be launched in the air. This in turn makes them vulnerable to any other form of damage, as they are unable to move whilst in the air, effectively stunning them for a solid moment. This combined with the rest of Rek'sai's kit makes her a constant threat, as with the tunnels she can come practically from anywhere on the map, and with the slight movement movement speed bonus, while burrowed, if you don't have any form of mobility yourself, she is guaranteed to catch up to you. By throwing the enemy in the air, it also gives more time for your allies to come help secure the kill, and the entire execution of plays like this is thanks to the wonders of burrowing. Conclusion! The most commonly reoccurring attribute of burrowing was mobility, and it just so happens that mobility is the key to creativity in gaming. Notice how slowing down time allows you to manipulate how and where you move more precisely, how you can do a sentry jump with the engineer's turret, how the implementation of a fourth dimension allows the player to traverse the environment around them in a completely new way, how the whistle from Pikmin moves the units around, how the gravity gun can open new pathways, how copying abilities with Kirby gives new movement options, or how you can do some sick grenade jumps depending on the game. Video games are a medium that allows the players to experience something they could only dream of doing in real life, and burrowing is a concept observed by humans as early as they observed birds and strived to one day fly like them. Burrowing is so unique to me because other than mobility we had attributes like crowd control, a source of devastating damage, the tool that allows you to sneak past the enemies and also be a useful tool to survive longer and have more fun playing the games you play. Because at the end, video games are supposed to be fun, and different opinions are more than welcome to be shared, which is why some of you, even after watching this video, are still not convinced that burrowing is the most creative ability in gaming's history. And that's great, because this video wasn't actually about just some silly mechanic that is done differently across multiple titles. No, this video was supposed to be a love letter to the video game industry. How much joy and fun we as the players can have in universes some of us would never even imagine. And that is why I will always be vouching for more original concepts in games. Originality is scarce nowadays when most people just ask any AI to think of something for them, which is truly sad. So to summarize once more, originality in gaming, a very welcome concept. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a waste of time probably, but if you had fun or if you enjoyed me talking to this microphone for more than 20 minutes, then I'm beyond happy. Thanks for watching, have a lovely day, bye bye.